Two, one. All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the talk. I see some of you are still kind of coming in here as you come in. I've put a few things in the chat that are important. The first one is, of course, this talk will be recorded and posted to YouTube. The link is down in the chat. The code will be available on GitHub at github.com/Adobe ColdFusion. There's a webinars repo in there. There will be a building basic CRUD applications with CF uh, repo to pull in from their subrepo. And then if you are not yet signed up, please consider joining us in Las Vegas in just a few weeks at CF Summit. This year's CF Summit is going to be something extra special. We're at the Bellagio. It's going to be super fun. It's going to be super amazing. I think people are going to have a great time. We've built a bunch of really amazing AI apps. Like last year, a lot of it was talking about AI. This year, it's really building in AI. And we just released an amazing update to ColdFusion that really enables AI-powered applications. I've built a bunch now. A lot of those will be on demo there. You'll be able to download code. It's going to be a lot of fun. But let's start off this seminar. So what are we talking about today? Well, today is the final edition of the CF Foundations series that I've been doing for the past, about year. And if you have missed those, please hop on over to the YouTube site that's listed there below, youtube.com/Adobe ColdFusion. Not to be mixed up with the version that doesn't have Adobe. That's some kind of news site that we are not affiliated with. And you can go and look at the other talks that I've done on things like the list object, the query object, the array object, as well as structs and object-oriented programming in Adobe ColdFusion. But today, we're going to take it one step further and talk about CRUD. So before I start, by the way, if anyone's not familiar with who I am, my name is Mark Takata. I am the senior Adobe ColdFusion evangelist. I've been doing this for about 5 years. As the evangelist, I've been programming for over 30 years. And Adobe saw fit to bring me in and make me decorative. So here I am talking about fun stuff in CF. So let's talk about CRUD for a bit. It's something that it's funny because I always just assume people know what CRUD means. And then I get like these funny looks from people about what it means. So CRUD, simply put, is for database operations. So if you're thinking about, let's consider something like a contact manager. That's what we've built today because I don't know, I'm not very creative. So I decided to build a contact manager. It's easy to understand. We all probably have built one or two in our time when we were playing with other programming languages. So this is a good one for people who are just coming into CF or need a refresher to understand. So if you have a contact manager, adding a contact is the creation. That's the C in CRUD. Listing contacts or even passing in a query to pull back one content is the read, right? It's pulling, it's retrieving or reading. I know some people use retrieve. I say read. A contact. Updating is changing an existing contact. So it's an update instead of an insert, right? These map fairly well to verbs in databases. And then, of course, deleting, like removing or getting rid of a record. Now, I will say one thing, and people can argue with me about this in the chat if they want to. I tend to, generally speaking, not enjoy actually deleting data, right? So for me, I don't know that I've written many actual CRUD apps. It's more like CRUA, CRUA apps, because instead of deleting, I tend to like to set them to an archive or or some kind of setting where they're not visible anymore, basically. And you're going to say, why? Why would you do that, right? Well, the reason why, there's a few reasons. I think one, the argument for a long time was space is cheap. and so there's really no reason to get rid of data ever. Um, and it can cause things like back in the day, you'd require like more defragging if you were removing stuff out of a disk. It's not really a thing anymore. But for me, I think the biggest issue is when you're dealing with data that may at some point need to be audited, or when you're dealing with data that may have to be retrieved by a user. And spoiler alert, that's pretty much every app, right? Every app is going to have users, and sometimes they're very important users who are going to say, "Hey, Mark, I know it's 2 a.m. on a Saturday, but me, the COO of name an important company, just accidentally deleted all 15 of my kids and grandkids and stuff from my contact manager. I need you to put them back." Right. Well, first of all, don't give your phone number out to the COO of name a major company. But unfortunately, they have my phone number, as do many of you. But the difference between going in and saying, sure, person who's super important, let me go in and change the flags on those and bring those back. And by the way, don't do that again. Don't delete your important kids accidentally, while having a little too much wine or whatever happened. Right. The difference between that and, okay, well, let me now try and get a hold of my DBA and see when the last time a backup happened, write the customized SQL to go pull back just this guy's stuff, insert that, deal with whatever other nonsense has to be dealt with. It's a big difference, right? So for me, at least architecturally, I have shied away from like full on nuclear strike from orbit deletion of data. Now, having said that, there's absolutely times when you do need to really actually delete a record. For example, when people request that their information or account be deleted, there's laws that actually talk about that, about like especially if there's PII, or things like that. Like there are times when you do have to absolutely 100% destroy that data and potentially even destroy it in your backups, right? So it's definitely something to think about both ways. But for me, I don't think I've written an actual delete outside of a demo in decades. So moving along. So the way that this is built out, we're going to build out something. There's going to be four different ways we're going to look at it. So we're going to look at a very traditional, old school way of building stuff out. Which, by the way, I do not recommend you use that particular thing. If you ever show me, "Hey, Mark, I used that code that you showed me to build a CRUD app," and I said, "Which one?" and you say, "The traditional one," I'll be mad. Don't do that. But it's a good place to just kind of show off, like, "Hey, this is this is a good way to show you what the CRUD operations do." But then we're going to go ahead and abstract that away, and it's a good place to start, so that once I start showing you some of the more complicated code where we've abstracted away things and made them more maintainable, yada yada, you'll be able to say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that was done in like this sort of block here that mixed a bunch of concerns together, which wasn't a good coding practice but was understandable." Then we're going to move that traditional sort of old school top-down procedural thing into component based. So we'll get out of tags, we'll go into script. We're going to use a shared CFC for this, because at the end of the day, even though we're moving into components and we're doing some modern endpoints, and we're going to use some HTMX, which is a fun little lightweight front end framework that I'll tell you about in a bit. Even though we're doing all those things, we're really just still doing the same operations at the end of the day behind the scenes. Some of it changes in terms of the front end, some of it changes in terms of the way the code is laid out. But honestly, end of the day, it's still CRUD. All right. So traditional, old school. These are literally the only files in this traditional thing. You've got a form on an add.cfm. You fill the form out, you click submit, that goes to an insert. and you go ahead and validate it. You do all that. I'll show you all this code here in a second and insert it. That's your create, right? For the read, we've got just the index, right? We go and select and we grab every, don't you select star, I will find you and I will defrost your fridge. List out all of the different fields and push them to the page. For editing, we're just going to go ahead and load one record. And by the way, these two things can be a similar page also. Sorry, the edit and the add can use the same form, and I'll show you that later when we do a component-based thing. You're going to load that one record, and then you're going to either change it in update.cfm. You're going to go ahead and do an update command, the verb. Or if you're deleting it, you don't need to list it out. You don't need to show what's in it. You don't need to do any of that. You probably, wink, wink, nudge, probably want to say, hey, do you really want to delete this? Are you sure, COO of important company? It's your grandkids. Really? Like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and delete it. Again, I probably wouldn't be deleting stuff in a real app. But let's take a look at what some of this looks like over here. Okay, so here we are in our super fun Visual Studio application, and we're going to go to the traditional app. So starting off, eep, you say, eep, Mark. Turn on some lights here. Okay, there we go, so you can actually see me. Why is there a CF query at the top of the page? Well, I told you this was really bad code. Don't do this. Don't do this. We're gonna later on. You'll see it's gonna look much better, easier to understand, and all that. But this kind of shows you like we're passing in. We're doing a select of all the fields from the context database. And by the way, this you'll see when this code gets pushed. This is all coming from Derby, the local database. And so it's really nice. Like you'll be able just to copy this code, and the first time you load it, it'll just go into Derby and build a table for you, and then like pre-populate it with a few fields. It's a really nice demo for you guys to be able to use and mess with. So you may even be able to do it on CF Fiddle. I don't know. I have to check that. But and then I do a little order by, right? And then we've got, traditional content manager, the stuff, and then we CF output, we put the query in, and then important, because we're all good programmers and we want to make sure we're being secure, we encode for HTML the stuff that's coming back out, because this content came from someone entering data into our database, right? So that when we push it back out, we want to make sure that there's no script tags or any other funky Cole Medina stuff in there, right? So we do that. And what does that look like on here? Well, it just looks like this, right? Which doesn't look bad. I think this is a thing too that some people get into arguments with their managers about, or more likely their managers is like, why do we have to change our code? It looks fine. It works fine. And it does. It actually looks great. Like here's our ad. I'm going to go ahead and add myself in here. My title is, cool guy, whatever. I like mountain bikes. So what's this going to do? This is going to go from add and it's going to push it to insert.cfm and then redirect me back to my main page. It's going to have a little message here that says content created. Yeah, it works good, right? So there you go. That was a create thing that we just did. I'm over mountain bikes. They're too dusty. I want to go paddling. I like stand-up paddle boards. So now you'll see we're in edit.cfm and there's an ID here. And so this is an important thing, right? Well, first of all, you have to be careful passing stuff in the URL. Just be careful doing that whenever you're doing it. Make sure that wherever it is, it's secure and that you trust the people that are using it. Make sure that if you're locking out which things can be edited, that is checked prior to showing this, right? Things like that. But in this case, we don't care. It's a little demo. It's fine. So it's going to pull back. My ID is 112. As you can imagine, I've been using this a lot and putting IDs in, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say update. That's going to push this data to another page called update and then push me back to my index.cfm, my read. There we go. All right. Well, turns out I wasn't very nice to that COO. because it was 2 a.m. and I was mad. So they fired me. So we're going to go ahead and delete me. Now we're going to delete.cfm, and here's that ID again. Be careful, right? I could come up here and just, change this to 111. And if I don't have that particular capability that I should have, I shouldn't be able to delete that person. We'll make sure that you're checking. But anyway, I do, and it does. So I'm going to say, yep, delete Mark, and poof, I am gone. All right. So that is the traditional way. Here's the actual code itself. So we've got edit, right? Edit up here. Remember, we're passing in the URL the value. And check this out. Whenever you're doing any kind of data, whether that's inserting or looking stuff up, parameterize it. And we're going to talk about parameterizing things here in just 1 second. That's really, really important. But we're editing, we're pulling back the direct thing, and we're pulling that back. Here on the insert, okay, so here's a really, really, really important thing on inserts that I'm going to harp on for just a little bit. Apologies for the rant. So you'll notice a couple of things here that might seem a little bit out of whack. The first one is that there's 2 timestamps. There's a created at and an updated at. Now, why would you not just have one? Well, generally speaking, architecturally speaking, you want both. Obviously, if your architect says no, but for me, having both is really important. It's good to know, especially if you can make that created by something that cannot be mutated later, can't be changed. It's a really great audit tool. You'll know when the thing was originally created. So if someone says, I've had that value in there since last year, and you go and say, sir, ma'am, no, I can see right here, this value was added last week. You were lying, right? It's really powerful to be able to do that and be able to prove it. But the more important thing that maybe you're saying, if you know anything about databases, is why are you parameterizing the dates, Mark? That makes no sense. Those are created by the actual app. There's no injection risk here. There's no. What are you afraid of? ColdFusion is going to SQL inject itself? Like, Mark, that's silly. Why would you do that? Well, there's a good reason. The first, of course, is that you should parameterize everything just out of spite for all the people trying to hack you. But more importantly, and this primarily is something that is Microsoft SQL Server related. I believe Oracle also has this. And by the way, this also does not apply if you're doing this with stored procedures, obviously. But if you are, then this doesn't matter to you anyway, right? So when SQL Server gets a query from ColdFusion, it checks to see if it has an execution plan already built. Okay. If any of the values that are coming in are not parameterized, even if you've hit that database 1,000 times in the last minute, it is going to generate a new execution plan and then run it. Now, depending on the size and complexity of your query and how much data you're inserting, all of that, I have literally, I know, like, no joke. We tested it a lot. I've seen 100x performance improvement from just parameterizing every single thing coming into a DB. No other changes. Now, this was a heck of a query and kind of ugly. There were other changes that we ended up making that made it even much faster than that. But something that was taking 10 plus seconds was like instant, right? Milliseconds. So really, really important to do that. That's a rant I'll have probably for the rest of my life with everyone. But all right, and then of course the delete is pretty interesting. Now, one thing to note on the delete, because we're doing a page reload and a refresh, right? You might say, well, why isn't there a delete and then really delete page? Well, you don't really need one. So what this page does is it comes in and it checks to see if there's a if there's a confirm delete value in the form that's being passed, when you initially come in, that doesn't exist, right? And so it's going to ask you, are you sure? When you say yes, the page is going to go ahead and resubmit to itself with that value and the number that you want it to delete in there, which is again another injection, potential, but again, that's a security thing, right? And then it's going to go ahead and delete it, and then it's going to send you back to your initial page, and we're good to go there. All right. So that is traditional flow. If anyone has questions, by the way, we've got a Q&A here. You can throw something in there. So again, yeah, creation, validation. This is some of the code, kind of stripped away from all the other stuff. There's your insert. There's your updates, deletes. Okay, moving right along. Components. Now this is a bit of a jump. I won't lie. It's a little. It's going to be a little more difficult. So the thing that we want to do is we want to move CRUD out of the individual pages and into a functional component, a CFC, that we're then going to use for all the rest of the apps here, right? And that's kind of the power here. That's kind of what I'm trying to show you, right? Like I'm able to use this thing and then reuse that code in many different applications, right? So we're going to have, and by the way, originally I'd written this as like an MVVM, kind of like a weird, almost quasi MVC type app, and it was just a little too much. But I think it's also still really important in your brain to think about conceptually, moving concerns apart from each other, right? So the visual aspect, the view, is in one place, right? The model is in another, and the like controllers in a third place. Like things are like showing, orchestrating, and then executing in three different places is potentially a good thing. You can sometimes combine some of those, like the orchestration execution. You can like have things in the similar space. That's fine. But you really don't want to have everything just in the page itself and repeating yourself constantly. It's just bad. You don't want that. So to do that, we've got a page that renders all the forms and tables, and then we've got an API endpoint. And that term is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, folks. Like it's not really it's not a RESTful endpoint. I'm not doing anything like that. It's just a page that I hit that you pass in, what you want to do, and it spits back. You pass what you want to do, and maybe pass some variables to it, some parameters, and it says, "Cool, here you go. Here's your return." And that return could be a list of stuff. It could be saying, "Yep, 200 status. I did the thing you asked me to do, and it came back fine. Everyone's happy, and we're off to the races." That page is contacts.cfc, and we'll show you that. It validates and runs the SQL, and then we redirect the user back to the main page where we're doing all of our work from. Okay, so let's take a look real quick. So we're going to close the traditional. We're going to go into shared. Okay, so these are the two things. Now you'll see this is not much more like spectacularly difficult or complex than the other one, right? We still have an index, um, but now we're doing a loop over an array, and that array is going to be created, by the way, um, from this shared contact CFC. So now let's look at the CFC, and you're gonna see things that look really like you know uh, similar to what you were doing before, like familiar, right? You've got a list function. That's the read, guys. Like this is just going out and grabbing stuff, right? This is grabbing everything. I've got a get here, and the get has a required ID, and that ID is going to get a single record, right? Or a creation, an insert. There's your insert again, right? So all these things should be familiar to you, right? We did all this. We did all this in the traditional, but now this lives. It's moved out of tag based, which I don't know. Arguments can be made. CF query versus CF. I still love CF query. Query execute. I don't know. I mean, this is pretty readable. I still have love for the original, the OG, because that's how I started. But this is still really good, right? We're passing all these values in. You'll notice we're parameterizing still. We still have the two types of things. Like this is all really, really, really familiar, right? And then the delete. Um, And then I also have a database bootstrap thing that runs, which I told you about. I mean, it's not that important. It has nothing to do with CRUD, but this is a nice little trick if you're ever doing a demo for someone and need a database. You can just literally use the stuff that's built into CF. Like it comes with a Derby DB, unless you remove it. Yeah, don't do this in production, obviously, but um, it's a nice little thing, and you could do SQL queries against it and show it. And then when you're ready, just move that into the DB of your choice. So there you go. So that's shared components, contacts, right? So yes, it's obviously there's more code here, and that's an argument I hear sometimes from folks that they like their simple, basic ColdFusion code, and I get that. Um, and if that's all if all you're ever going to have is that, that's fine. I mean, go for it, I guess, right? Um, But at some point, if you're a professional developer, you will move beyond something like this. And the moment that you begin to have, this is like what, one, two, three, four, five, six CFM files, right? Once you start having 20, 30, 40 different files in this structure, which you will have, and let me make that clear, like in this particular methodology of programming, you will just simply continue to add files. Not to make this a new programming versus old programming style discussion, but I think it's important to tell you why I'm teaching the way that I'm teaching. Um, it becomes unmaintainable, and that unfortunately has created in the industry this mythology that Cold Fusion is an old, outdated language, and the code bases are difficult to work with or crap or whatever you want to say. Well, the issue is not Cold Fusion. Cold Fusion is absolutely 100% capable of doing this. If I showed someone this code really quick, they'd be like, "Is that JavaScript?" Like it looks like a modern scripting language, and it is, and it looks like one because it is, right? And you can structure it that way in a language, which, by the way, is multi-threaded, like really performant. It's got Java behind the scenes, tons and tons of other stuff. So anyway, I don't have to sell Cold Fusion to you, but all right. So again, the contacts.cfc, right? This owns the validation, it owns the CRUD. It's all in one place. If you have to end up adding new pages, new functionality in this particular thing, and by the way, also to be clear, I just mentioned JavaScript. This has no JavaScript built into it right now. This is still fully server-side rendered Cold Fusion code. There's no fancy framework on the front end. There's nothing. There's not a React app or a Vue app or Angular app, whatever. None of that exists in here. It's not even vanilla JavaScript. It's just straight up Cold Fusion code being rendered on the server, right? But it's still It's still a better maintainable, more intelligently structured Cold Fusion. And we'll talk about adding a little bit of better user experience in a second with a reactive front end. This is another function inside of the shared CFC. And then the endpoint contacts.cfm, the thing I showed you inside of API. This maps the actions to the calls, right? So this is like a model. This is a map, a model, whatever you want to call it, that goes and it pulls it through with a simple case statement, right? And you can kind of see, like, it's easy enough if you had a one more different way of hitting it. It's very easy to just add it to a couple files, and now it's still maintainable. There's not a bunch of files. You don't have to go looking for things. You know exactly where it is. If there's one thing that this is missing, I would have, yeah, maybe spent a little more time documenting where, why, how. all of this is happening. It's just a good idea to have good documented code. But in any case, it's pretty self-documenting. List, create, and delete are pretty obvious, right? Because they're verbs. They're CRUD verbs. Okay, so we're going to talk. Oh, how am I on time? Okay, I've got some time. So we're going to talk a little bit about HTMX. So before I go into full blown front end, no, I mean I'm not going to have a framework, but like front end JavaScripty stuff, in place async type things. I want to tell you a little bit about this framework, this library called HTMX. So, and there's a few caveats here. There's a few warnings before you go using this in production. Now, I have used this in production. This is actually a really great framework. I love it. But I am also somewhat biased. So the very first JavaScript talk that I ever went to many, 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 many years ago, I won't say how many, but many, was by a gentleman named Carson Gross, and he was telling us all about something called intercooler.js, and I fell in love. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I loved it. Ha, cooler, sorry, pun. But I thought it was just really, really fun. And over time, Carson realized, well, he wanted to move to Montana for some weird reason. Guess he likes bison, but also he saw the problems that Intercooler had and decided to restart that project and build HTMX. Well, lo and behold, many many years later, HTMX is kind of big now. It's got a huge following online. People like argue it's a meme framework. I think that's mostly because Carson is kind of a silly, unserious person and has been like, yeah, it kind of is a meme framework, but really at the end of the day, it's not. It's a really powerful, amazing way for you to use your cold fusion skills for the logic without having to learn, new front end stuff and server side render. So what does HTMX do? Well, at its core, HTMX extends the concept of HTML to where the originators of HTML originally wanted to go. So the H in HTML stands for hypertext, right? And the concept of hypertext is that you should be able to link anything to anything and be able to apply verbs anywhere to any object. Well, that clearly never happened, right? The objects inside of HTML are limited, like the href object. When you make a link, right, that does a get. Inside of forms, we have the post object, we have we have a get on there. Like, so there are we decided at some point way back in the day, and I should know this since I was around back then. Cough. Um, we decided we are going to limit verbs. So HTMX throws that out the window and says you can apply any verb to anything. Um, More importantly, what you can do is you can replace the contents of any object inside of the DOM with any other object, the domain object model. You can just replace anything with anything. So if you wanted to, you could do a call to a ColdFusion page, which renders a bunch of HTML on the server, renders out a list of your contacts if you want, and then drop that into a div. And then if you want to, you can then go and grab a fragment and add it onto the end of that div asynchronously without a page reload. It is really a powerful way to do in place progressive improvement and modernization of your apps. I really love it. Just do keep in mind, it is basically run by a very small team. The joke is if a big enough meteor hit Montana, HTMX would stop existing, which unfortunately is kind of true. A lot of them are out there. I mean, they've spread out. Obviously, there's a big Discord now. There's lots and lots of people out there. People love it. It's a great framework, but just do keep in mind it's on the smaller side. All right, so let's go through and see how. So how does this work? So the first thing that HTMX does is it replaces some of the built-in verbs, like the way that form works, and tweaks it a little bit. So it uses hx post instead of the normal post command. So instead of refreshing the page, you're targeting some other target and sending the contents of that object, which in this case is a form object, to something on the back end. Cool. Okay. And then we've got a CFC that's run through contacts.cfn. Remember, you've got that there. And then There's HTML that's rendered by the endpoint, and that gets sent back down a fun little water slide of joy to the workspace div, which is sitting in the middle of your page. And there you go. Ta-da. Bob's your uncle. You now have a new asynchronously updated piece to your page. So what does that look like? Well, one thing to keep in mind is because of the way that this works, it is going to look, oopsie, it's going to look a little different. So it's on the left. It's kind of in different layouts. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's still doing CRUD operations, still doing the basic stuff behind the scenes. It's still using, by the way, all the CFC stuff that we just looked at, the create, read, all that stuff inside of there is still being orchestrated by the same model. It's still being pushed to that same thing. It's just happening all in the background. Okay, so what's my title? CF dude. And I like turtles. Okay, so what's going to happen now, by the way? So look up here, like this is not going to change. I'm going to go ahead and hit that. And what just happened was this form sent its payload back through HTMX to all of the files that we just talked about, the CFC. It figured out that I wanted to do an insert. It took that form data, passed it to that CFC. That CFC said, you're doing an insert. Here's the data. We're going to parameterize it. We're going to push it through SQL. And then what we're going to do, because we want this to refresh, is we're going to go ahead and pull this back and throw it into the workspace folder, or the workspace div. There it is. Cool. Then if I say edit, it's going to take the data that's in that row and throw it back and then populate this. So this is actually going to be populated kind of in line with stuff. And now I like turtles a lot. It's been updated. So I mean this is either like super awesome magic stuff for you, or Mark, this is super boring. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. But yeah, I think it's a really great way to just update one section of a site and then slowly update things and make them better over time. Like if you've got a legacy site that you just have not known what to do with, you don't want to control and delete the whole thing, but it also is kind of old and doesn't feel right. Like this is a way to do that. You can start to slowly, like Strangler Fig style, pull in little pieces of it and update it. Cool. So let's look at the code here a little bit. So as you can see, the difference here, these are the important parts of this. So normally when you have a form, right, you have an action, and that action is the page that you're sending stuff to. So we are hijacking that. We're intercepting that, and we're doing an HX post. And by the way, this is really important. If you're sending data into something, you use post. If you're pulling data back, it's HX get. So you do have to think a little bit more about your verbs here. But we're sending this into context.cfm, and we're passing an action. And then we're targeting workspace as the return. Okay. Now, by the way, this is something that is not obvious in here. If you have a CF output, or if this is being generated by CF script, one of the things that is a little tiny bit annoying dealing with HTMX is that it does use a lot of pound signs because you're targeting IDs in things, right? And so you do have to kind of be aware of where you're at and escape the thing as needed. That's an annoyance. I wish there was a way to change that. But unfortunately, there really is not. It is what it is. And then what we're doing is we're just doing an HX swap on the inner HTML. There's other things like you can append things. You can prepend. There's different actions that you can take to put things in different places inside of your content, right? And then we've got your input, and then we're just using a button, giving it the type submit, and booyah, it goes there. And then what comes back is just HTML, right? So it's just going to come back. So we render all the forms, the messages, everything is rendered here, and this is what returns back from the call. It's a fully rendered. It's not JSON that you then have to loop through on the front end or anything like that. This is fully server rendered stuff. It's stuff you know how to do. That's why this is really useful and powerful for ColdFusion people. All right. So oh boy. Okay. Modern. Modern. So let's look at how this is going to be a little bit more than that. So now let's look at something where we're doing a full boat move to, JSON. We're going to consume JSON. We're going to use fetch to hit endpoints, to pull back things, to write things, to delete things and everything. We've got a form, and that form either adds a contact or edits one. So that's important. I'll show you that in a second. The API, we're doing gets and posts to the endpoint. And then we use JavaScript to rebuild the table after changes. So there's still not a page reload, but now rendering happens on the browser, not in the server. In HTMX and the previous things, everything happened on the server and then was served in a variety of ways, either through full browser refresh or injection into a div. In HTMX case, that is not what's happening here. So we've got fetch going out and passing the action, the options, and everything. And then we're doing an await response on it. So this is, by the way, this is vanilla JavaScript. This is the basics. I am of the opinion that every ColdFusion developer should at least know vanilla JavaScript extremely well. Like, yes, you should probably also go out and learn React or other things for front end stuff, but this is stuff you should know. And then if the response is not okay, then we throw a new error. Okay, let me just kind of show you the modern app. All right. Again, I changed up a little bit of what's here. I'm actually doing this to kind of show you how this all works. So I'm going to delete myself out of here. So you saw that it never changed here, right? So this passed the delete verb back to the app. And behind the scenes, it deleted it and then re-rendered just this table behind the scenes. So let's add myself back. My title is dude, I don't know, whatever. I want donuts. We're going to go ahead and add this again. Like, if you watch all this, nothing, it gets re-rendered, but the page does not get updated. So now something that's important. Watch this. So now if I want to edit, what this is going to do, this is going to use the same form that I had for adding, but it's going to go back and pull the data and then populate the data back into the same form. But now it knows that this is an edit, not an insert, right? So we're passing an ID. If the ID exists, then it's going to go ahead and do it as an edit, not an insert. I do the changes. I come down here. I want donuts now. That's rendered right into this. Now, if you use frameworks, some of this is happening in what's called a shadow DOM. It's happening behind the scenes. You can actually have stuff that just almost automatically updates as soon as the database updates, like with WebSockets and things like that. That's not what this is. This is really This is really the basic stuff. So we're still, by the way, we're still using this contact CFC. We're doing all that with this one. But all we're doing is we're just calling it back there. And now to do all of the updates and pushes and loops, row appends, things like that. Now we're using app.js. And this is literally just vanilla, basic JavaScript, well written, pretty easy. You can read this from top to bottom and figure out what all of these things do, right? So there you go. So that is, let's see what we got here. Like I said, edit fills the same form by passing in a value for which ID it's looking for. And here's where some of the complexity stuff. So there's this theory called the conservation of complexity, and basically the way that it looks, the way that the theory goes is that there's a minimum level of complexity that every app has that cannot be destroyed. All you can do is push the complexity either more onto the user or more onto the developer. Sometimes that's the UX developer, sometimes that's the programmer, whatever that happens to be. I think these days, I guess it can also be AI, right? If you want it to, tell you that your car is a donut, I guess you could do that. Just kidding. But so as you kind of look down this, what you're doing is you're pushing more and more of the difficulty and the whatever onto the programmer and making it slightly easier and a better experience for the user, right? So that's kind of where that's the reasoning behind some of this is, right. In traditional, like, it's doing full page refreshes. It's like maybe not a great experience. The whole thing flashes. Sometimes the page disappears and has to reload, all of that, right? Component based is more about, being able to provide more features easily in a more maintainable way, right? HTMX, now suddenly things will be asynchronously updated, not the whole thing, but like parts and pieces. You're still using your traditional ColdFusion skills behind the scenes. It's still server rendered. All of that is still the same, but now you're suddenly able to provide a slightly better experience for your user. And then full blown modern, fetch, updating things line by line. The step beyond this one, or maybe is even in line with this one, is to use a framework that does, state management and all of that. All of these things make the app better. All of them make it more maintainable. All of them will make a better experience for your users. Um, and there you go. So there it is. That is the talk. Does anyone have questions about CRUD, about any of this, about the things that I've posted in chat, um, about donuts? Anyone? All right. Alrighty. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. It was great having you here. I hope that I will see you all in Vegas. Vegas is going to be super, super fun. We're going to be having, hey, Rich. Yeah, you're very welcome, Rich. We're going to be having a hackathon after the summit. So stay tuned for that. That'll be super fun. I'll be talking on LinkedIn a bunch about some of the demos that I've built for Summit. I think you all will really enjoy those. There's some really fun stuff. After Summit, the code for those demos will be released for folks to play with and build new apps with. And I can't wait to see what all of you do with that. Like I said, the code for this will be up on GitHub in a few days. And enjoy it, use it. Hopefully, it can be used to help improve your stuff. Definitely, obviously, make sure that you're, being careful, double checking that this code is production ready for your environment. It's not exposing anything. Make sure you understand, if you're using HTMX, that it is an external library, and all of what comes with that, right? But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.